What's up, everybody? My name is Victor, and welcome to my YouTube page, which is all about helping people navigate their ascension process. And today's video is my Friday question and answer video, where I answer all my subscribers' questions they have throughout the week. I always leave a list of the questions right below in the description box. And here we go. So this is something that at some point of your ascension journey, you're going to become aware of. This is something that is one of the more challenging things to digest about the ascension process, and that is the realization that not everybody is going where you're going. There is, in fact, a separation occurring where some people are choosing to heed the call of their soul, to lift themselves up, vibrationally speaking, to make it into a new realm of existence, the fourth density or the fifth dimensional earth. Some people are doing the opposite. They're resisting the energies by hardening their egoic shell. And unfortunately, there will be a point where there will be a separation where you will not even be able to really connect with them anymore. They will just completely fade out of your life. This is challenging because a lot of the times, the people who you start to perceive and kind of know aren't going to make the shift are people you know, people, your friends, or sometimes your family. And this is a kind of a devastating thing to realize. And I even made myself a note to be kind of sensitive about this with people, because I know what it felt like when I started to realize that. And you can't really hide yourself from that truth that you just start to kind of know. It's very undeniable, and you just know. It's kind of sucks. But the little silver lining I'm going to go over is the degree of your awareness of this fact is parallel to the expansiveness of consciousness that you have acquired and built up towards. And as you come into this realization, you simultaneously also kind of embody higher truths of your soul, meaning you know that this separation doesn't mean that they're gone. They're going off and living their own existence as eternal souls that are just as high and mighty as you, are just choosing a little bit of a different path, a detour, you could say, which for you, it might not be the wisest choice, but for them, it's perfect and appropriate and awesome and no less spiritual than what you're doing. You kind of know this. It's not something you must make yourself believe. It just becomes, it's an obvious truth that sort of just becomes part of who you are. You also come into the realization that truly loving someone is allowing them to make their own choices in life. It's not trying to manipulate them to do what you believe they need to do to avoid your own sadness and pain of them perhaps parting ways with you. That's not love. As a rebel soul, as an indigo soul, which you all are indigo type souls, you know it's not cool to tell people what to do. So don't let yourself do that to other people. Just because you think from your little perspective that it's best for them to do what you believe they need to do, you got to let them have that choice. Even if it's very obvious to you that they'd be happier jumping on this other ship that's kind of starting to sail away a bit, it's not what's right for them. And if it was, they would be on this ship, and then we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So, as you expand, as you enlighten yourself, you become aware of a lot of things and how things actually are. And some of them, to an unprepared human mind, are quite challenging to take on. But you only come into these realizations at the rate at which you're progressing and able to handle them. So a lot of these terms get thrown around in the spiritual community, and someone asks, what is the deal? I hear people talking about fourth density, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and people kind of use them interchangeably. So what do they mean? Where are we actually going? Are we going to the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension? Here's what it is. You could say it two different ways. You could say we're going from third density to fourth density. They're just vibrational planes of existence. The fourth density, earth, realm, plane of existence is a finer, higher vibrational state that we are choosing, many of us are choosing to match so we can exist in. You could also say we're going from the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension. Some people call it the third dimension, but that's kind of debatable because there is the other dimension of time. Anyway, so they're just terms to describe, but essentially all you have to really know is that if you're watching a video like this, you're essentially one of the people who are ascending to this higher plane of existence. You're raising your vibrational frequency so you can tune in to a new earth, a new experience that already exists in the here and now, and you will get to tune into it just as if you were to change your station on your television from channel 7 to channel 10. They both exist simultaneously. You're choosing to tune in to channel 10, where some people are remaining on channel 7. But you're getting sick of channel 7. It's kind of the same old reruns, and you want to kind of jump ship and tune into channel 10, where there's just unlimited, amazing possibilities waiting for you, adventures that are going to just blow your mind, that are waiting for you on channel 10. Well, when is the best time to meditate? I have my own opinion on this. First, I'll give you what many teachers would say, and that's early in the morning, usually when the sun is coming up, or just before the sun comes up and the earth is still facing east. I say whenever you can actually do it regularly. If you're not a morning person, then you're probably not going to be one to meditate if you have it firmly in your mind that, well, the best time is in the morning and I can't do it in the morning, so maybe I won't meditate. Maybe I'll try something else. I say you meditate whenever you can do it. There are some things that you can kind of apply to your decision of when to do it, and it is best to do it on an empty stomach. I prefer to meditate in a fasted state. I do a diet technique that I picked up as a personal trainer that's awesome for helping people get really ripped and lean very easily. It's called intermittent fasting. And all that does is you restrict your feeding window. Most people eat around the clock. They wake up, they have breakfast, they go to work, they have lunch, they come home, they eat dinner, they snack at night, and they have this big gap, this big feeding window when they're eating. If you shorten that window, you get to kind of go into the fasted state every day. And there's a lot of fat burning and life extending benefits to it. But also, which not a lot of people even talk about or notice, is in this fasted state, you're much more grounded, you're much more in alignment. All these like spiritual abilities are much more easy. So when you meditate, you have less going on in your body with digestion and food sitting in your stomach and gas and whatnot. And you're just more of a pure vessel. And you can reach the meditative state much easier. So someone is asking, I think, they're wondering if psychedelic drugs are actually good for opening your chakras, or if it actually sort of closes them up and represses them in an adverse way. I believe that's kind of the essence of what they're asking me. So this is kind of a twofold thing. On one hand, in my experience with psychedelic drugs, which I used to do quite often in a very responsible way, I used to grow my own mushrooms, and I would take smaller doses and just kind of explore my consciousness with them on like a weekly basis for like one summer anyway. I would also make mescaline out of the San Pedro's cactus. I used to like little stuff like that. But I would do it with like a pretty pure intent. And I found every time I took them, my chakras blew wide open. They freaking blasted my chakras open. In fact, the whole initial experience of my psychedelic trip usually was me just kind of sitting there and allowing the energy of whatever I took to kind of clear me out and like awaken my chakras and align me with my higher self. And then from there, I would go about my day and I would like write stuff down. I would get insights. I would explore. I would kind of look at my life and just take notes. And it was a very enlightening experience. But at the same time, one could argue that the after effect is your chakras become kind of mucked up because psychedelic drugs will blow them open prematurely, big time. And sometimes I would find that they would get blown open and I would feel great even afterwards. Other times I would have a little bit of like a hangover type feeling where I'd feel like energetically out of balance after the psychedelic trip. So it really just depends on the person, the timing of your own journey. But in my opinion, when used in a very mature and pure intention psychedelic substances, especially the natural ones like psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, stuff like that, mescaline, they have a very healing effect on you if you don't abuse it, if you don't abuse them, if you don't come to rely on them to feel spiritual, because there is a trap in that. I got 2 questions that basically are saying the same thing. One of them said, how can I get my spouse in on this whole awakening thing? Another person asked, how can I guide my small children to, I forgot the way they worded it, but it was something like to the grace of their own divine alignment. So how do I guide my children to become their true core selves, which is essentially the same thing as saying getting them in on the awakening thing. So how do you do that the best way? There's nothing you can say to them really that's going to make them do that. The best way you could do it, and it's not what you're going to want to hear, but it's to be a living example. To not preach to them, not try to force them, especially your kids. Don't try to manipulate them. Oh, let's meditate and focus on our third eye. Maybe that'll spark up this kundalini a little. Because to anyone who's ready to awaken, the experience of someone or an example in their life of someone who is exemplifying the traits of someone who at least is on that greater path of awakening, displaying more love and groundedness and more uniqueness, unrestricted by their ego and insecurities, that is attractive. And that will eventually, for one, energetically rub off on them, especially with your family. Your aura is bigger than your body. It's a huge, big bubble. And you're always immersed in people's bubbles who you're around. And your aura is going to become quite attractive and it's going to feel kind of good. It's going to be like, wow, this person's energy is awesome. And it will rub off on your house, wherever you go, your family especially. And they will, if they're ready, which most of them are, if you're living with them, it's like your children and whatnot. In fact, your children are quite possibly more spiritual than you could even imagine. But anyway, you'll rub off on them energetically. And by being an example, the way you act will be attractive to them. And it might spark their own interest in asking, wow, I'm fascinated at what you're up to. How are you doing this? How do you feel so calm right now? I'm impressed with all the progress you've made with your new business you started. You just started, someone who's awakening starts to become very successful on all levels by definition, and people are going to notice that. Should light workers stay away from coffee or caffeine in general? Now, this is so many questions. They're kind of a paradoxical in nature. I had an experience many years ago, or a few years ago, where I felt like I had to stop drinking coffee, and that was because I was experiencing a tremendous degree of the Ascension fatigue. And I knew it was like the way I would describe the fatigue was like a central nervous system burnout. And coffee excites and stimulates an aspect of your central nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, and it creates that fight or flight feeling. And the Ascension process sometimes triggers that as well, because you're constantly dealing with these heavy challenges, and that you go into like this fearful fight or flight mentality. So you're kind of always in that. And then when you have coffee, it kind of exacerbates that. And then it can lead to really high degrees of burnout. And I would find that when I would cut down on my caffeine or just stop drinking altogether, I was able to have less of that fatigue. So at that point, there was plenty motive for me to stop using it. But is coffee in general bad for light workers? No, I drink coffee now. I even drink sometimes like pre-workout drinks. They get me all psyched up. But that's just me, because I don't have that burnout anymore. I don't have my awakening is kind of balanced out quite a bit, so I'm not always in that fight or flight state of being. So you just have to kind of be honest with where you're at on your path and decide for yourself. Experiment, try it. See, it's really that simple. If you think coffee might be bad, well, stop drinking it for a week. And a real quick tip on that: I see so many people like come off of coffee so like abruptly, and the withdrawal symptoms from coming off caffeine when you're used to drinking a lot of it they suck, man. You feel tired and you have a headache. But weaning off of caffeine is really, really easy. For example, when I cut off my caffeine, when I stopped drinking caffeine, at the time I was drinking like 2 Keurig cups of coffee every day. So right off the bat, I just started drinking 1 cup a day, and that was like I didn't get any withdrawal symptoms. I slightly for a day or two craved more because you were used to it, but it was very minimal, very manageable. And then eventually I started just kind of not finishing my whole cup of coffee. This was like a period of a week maybe. So by the end of it, I was only drinking like a few sips of coffee, no problem, no symptoms. And then, after a week or 10 days, I just stopped drinking it. But I would wake up and I'd take like a cold shower. I kind of had other ways of waking myself up. I'd wake up and do Kundalini yoga. So if you're going to come off it, just a side note, just like wean off it real quick. It makes it a lot easier and less miserable. And then see how you feel. Do you feel better in absence of the caffeine? Ask yourself. I found myself, in one sense, I felt better without the caffeine on some levels. I felt a little more just calm, just a little bit more like relaxed. But I loved drinking coffee at the time. Then winter came around, I'd see my wife and I would smell the coffee she was making. I was just like, God, I really badly, a cup of coffee would be just gold right now. Then I was like, why are you, what's the big deal? So I tried it back out. I tried the coffee, and then at that point I was fine. So just kind of listen to your own body. Someone asked me, how do you like perform? How do you astrally project? Astral projection. I'm going to make a separate video on that, so I'm not going to like touch on that too much. But I will say that you need 3 things. You need to have your third eye kind of opened. You need to be very meditative, because to astrally project, you have to stay conscious while you slip through the transitional phases that separate you from awakening state of consciousness to sleep. You have to stay conscious the whole time. And thirdly, you have to have an effective technique that will actually make it work. And I'm going to share a video pretty soon about all that, okay? This is kind of an interesting one. And I wasn't going to even answer it because I suspect this from maybe a younger person, but maybe not. I apologize if I'm wrong. But someone says, what do you think God feels about all this? And it was a comment on multiple videos. So I just think they're talking about in general. How do you think God feels about the talk of ascension, all these like different things? I guess the overall general content of my videos. What do you think God thinks of it? Well, here's what I think. I think a lot of people humanize and they impose very limiting human traits onto God, as if it's just another person somewhere in space and time who gets jealous and gets envious and gets happy and has the desire for things to play out a certain way. That's just a reflection of how deluded and how unconscious humanity is, because it's a very common perception of God. When you ask people, they'll say, oh no, I know he's not some guy in the sky looking at us, condemning us, waiting for us at the gates. But people's actions sort of say otherwise, that people do really humanize them, think they can piss off God, get God disappointed in them, and stuff like that. But again, that's the fundamental illusion of that mentality, is that God is separate. He's over here and you're here. And he wants you to live a certain way and you're doing your best to. So what do I think God feels about any of this? God doesn't feel anything about anything. God is everything. God, you are made of God. This piece of paper, I'm reading this question, this is no less God than you are. This is no less God than your imagination of what God actually is. All things in existence are created out of God. God is this one massive thing that expresses itself in all these intricate ways as a way of experiencing itself. Just like a wave is as every much a part of the ocean as like the whole ocean in its essence. The wave is not separate from the ocean. A wave is an expression, a manifestation, an extension of the ocean, just as you and everything else in existence is. That's my perspective. I'm not saying you must believe what I'm saying. You asked me though, and that's what I have to say about that. There's a lot of ingrained guilt imposed upon people through most religions, that a lot of people have the feeling like they ought to be acting in a particular way, and because of their limited human beingness, they usually come short, sin, missing the mark. They come up short. That's what sin means. And that produces a tremendous amount of guilt. And usually it's that guilt that locks people in from this very limited and distorted perception of God being, again, a separate person who gets angry at you. And I'm not suggesting you should take on what I'm saying. I'm just giving you my perspective, and you're free to do what you want with it. I don't really need or want you to believe anything. I want you just to walk your own path, whoever asked this question, okay? But that's my personal opinion. And this one as well, I'll probably make a separate video on. Someone asked about, he said he's having really vivid, crazy dreams, more vivid than ever before. And they seem to be kind of like, I don't remember if he said this, but oftentimes when you have these vivid dreams, you can't help but analyze them in extent, because they are vivid, and there does seem to be a little bit of an elusive meaning somewhere in the mishmash of the projections of your consciousness in the dream state. So I think he just asked me to kind of touch on it. But yeah, it's very normal, because you're becoming more conscious as a human being. Therefore, you're becoming more aware of the dream state. You're seeing more of it, experiencing just like in your waking state, you're experiencing energies and people, your emotions more richly. So too are you having that same experience of expansiveness in your dream state. So rather than being really foggy where you don't remember it, you experience your dreams very potently. It's almost like you're not really sleeping. You're just kind of going somewhere else and having this kind of dreamlike experience, and then you're back, and then you're back in the physical form again. So on one hand, it's just a part of your expanding consciousness, something to expect. Another thing is oftentimes your higher self, your guides, if you want to call them, that communicate to you in your dreams. I know for the longest time, the way I would get guidance from my guides or whatever, I just call them my guides, but it could be my higher self, guidance from myself, is I would have something when I'm dreaming, and a certain phrase or something would be said that kind of like was very noticeable. Like, oh wow, and then I'd wake up, and that would be kind of ringing in my head, whatever I just said, or a song that was playing in the dream, or some experience. I would wake up at those precise times, and that was kind of how I knew what the message was. So that's one way to kind of use your dreams. But also, dreams are usually they always really are just a reflection of what's going on in your unconsciousness. So it's very valuable to be lucid enough in them and remember them, where you can draw insights. I've had so many like breakthroughs and spiritual insights because of my choice to decipher my dreams and try to pluck out the meaning, which usually has a lot more to do with your emotional states than what's actually happening. Okay guys, that's all for today. I will most likely upload a part 2 either tomorrow or the next day. I'm going on vacation up north. So with that, I will close. If you guys have any questions, go ahead, of course, leave them in the comment section below. Hit me up on Facebook, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.